Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Red Lettuce. We have Tankie Talk with us today. We're going to talk about all the crazy things that have been going on this week. There's a lot to cover. Tankie Talk, why don't you let us know where people can find your show and what you're working on lately?
Absolutely. So the show, just search Tankie Talk. It's on YouTube, and I don't know, lately there's been kind of a lot going on, but not a lot of it on YouTube. That.
Yeah.
Right now, the show's going in a little bit of a different direction than it has been before. I kind of went. It used to be like a vlog kind of setup. Now I'm trying to make it a little bit more news based, but then also I'm kind of unfulfilled with doing that. So I might be trying to change it again. I'm not really sure. The heart of the show has always been just I read news articles or I hear something about that's going on in the news and that I want to talk about it. So that's originally what it was without any straight news, was just me yelling about the news at my phone. And then now it's a little bit more me reading the article and giving commentary between it, and we'll see if it evolves beyond that or not. I like to play it fast and loose in my channel, but yeah, so that's what's going on a little bit briefly.
Yeah, no, I think you have some really great stuff on your channel. It's very useful information, especially when it comes to understanding, Marxism. You got some really good, got some good episodes there on that, so people can, um, get a better understanding of what it means.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, that's how I found you, and I found that stuff very informative. So, um, yeah, so I guess let's get into it. We saw what went down at the Capitol, and there's been a lot of hot takes on both
Yes.
sides, uh, and it's very disappointing.
No,
Um,
yeah, I hear you.
I
Just to
don't know what's your take?
Yeah, I would just to simplify too, because I've been having the same thing, and I feel like maybe that was a part of what was just happening too. Is it's hard to know what to call it. I'm just gonna call it militias. They're militias, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want to call them. I'm gonna wrap them up into that they're a militia or a bunch of militias. But I don't know. I mean, to take my opinion, my personal opinion, based on what I've seen, is it looks like there was a concerted. Honestly, it looks like it was a concerted coup attempt. I think that's really what the goal was. They definitely had police that were a part of it. There's reports coming out now that as they were gaining access to the Capitol building, they were flashing people in the crowd, not in uniform, not a part of the DC police. That they were flashing badges and military IDs. So there definitely was a military and police component to the group, um, even if not in an official capacity. Though I think some of the videos make it pretty clear that at least some of the DC police were on board with what was happening. Um, I think that their plan was absurd. I think that it was a very poorly planned thing. And I think that that's kind of a testament to how buffoonishly unfit Trump is to do the things he's trying to do, which, in my opinion, is kind of more scary than promising, just because what that implies. And they just did a poll. 45% of the fucking country agree with what they were doing. 45%. That is shocking. So what that shows me is that this 45% of the country that somehow think that what they were doing was good, which their plan, to be clear, from what I've read, was to go in, was to destroy the electoral college votes, and to perhaps, I've heard some rumblings, but I haven't seen a solid source for yet, perhaps take some people hostage, and call for the election to be overturned in some way. And that's a cartoonishly bad plan. But that what it shows that there's that much support for it is that even though Trump's terrible at this, that that group doesn't need Trump. Kind of, I mean, Trump is kind of an opportunist who smelled the money in the air. Because let's be clear, Trump made so much money off of that group, off of just his base. Um, that there's definitely going to be another opportunist, no matter what happens to Trump as an individual. There's definitely going to be someone who fills that gap. And if they're even halfway good at planning a coup or planning something similar to what happened, we don't know what'll happen next time, which is, I think that's what worries me a little bit. It's like I said, it was clownishly bad, but there's people apparently willing to push for this right-wing takeover literally of this already right-wing government. And the big takes that I've been seeing wrong generally are people who are saying that the left, like the left got shown up, or that we should do something like that, or that it's in any way something positive. And I feel like those people are just like, they're looking at revolt as an abstract. And it kind of is showing, at least to me, how tricky stuff like this can get when you don't have when you're using liberalism to try to make sense of what's happening, because that's like the heart of the problem that I'm seeing people fall into. They're like, we are also against the state, so why shouldn't we support these people against the state? And they don't see how the material goals of a socialist are different than the material goals of this white nationalist militia group. And that's kind of troubling from an education standpoint, I guess, of like how far the gap is.
Yeah, I just wouldn't say I would call it a coup.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if coup. I'm sorry, I don't know if coup's like technically the right word. I think, and I think that there was definitely stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about. Because
right. And yeah, I think there's some things that we don't know about, and I think we're seeing it now. We're seeing more excuses from the state to expand surveillance and censorship, and guess who that hurts the most?
yeah, that's true.
So I saw a friend of mine made a tweet. My other friend Eric, and it kind of inspired me to get all my thoughts out about this. So I just want to just kind of go over like my thoughts about it. So we know that what took place at the Capitol wasn't a revolutionary moment, but I think it's fair to say it demonstrates the revolutionary potential that permeates people's minds, since the masses of working families here are being decimated by capitalism. I think, like in many other movements, these people were once again duped by Trump and used by the bourgeoisie to serve the interest of the state apparatus that seeks to expand surveillance and censorship. The so-called left labeling everyone in attendance a fascist, racist, white supremacist should instead see them for who they are: desperate, misguided working families who want change in to their material conditions, just like others who attend Black Lives Matter demonstrations. We shouldn't be so hyper-focused on the income levels of the people in attendance, because, as we know as Marxists, that doesn't determine whether or not someone is working class. It's their relation to production and having to sell their labor power to a capitalist. And that means most of the people that attend either a Black Lives Matter or a Trump rally are our fellow proletariat comrades. So imagine if we had a left that didn't alienate and view working families as the enemy. Imagine if we had a left that went to the masses to promote revolutionary socialism, which teaches optimism, progress, and class unity. It would lay the foundation for a viable proletarian revolution to seize state power. As communists, instead of attacking and abandoning Trump supporters, calling them fascists, we should be talking to them and our right-wing family members and correct their incorrect ideas on racism and anti-immigration bigotry, which are shaped to benefit the status quo. The analysis we share about government corruption, corporate greed, and the need to replace it with a government of action that will rebuild this country and fight for working families is a commonality. We must approach the masses thoughtfully and dialectically, not hysterically, because it is far likelier than you think that they understand Marxism.
So it sounds like me and you might be not in agreement on this action, though I think that what you said about engaging with family members and neighbors is important, right? I think that's important, and I feel like sometimes that gets missed. People will say, even that the whole trope, this is something I guess we're agreement and disagreement a little bit, is the whole trope that Trump supporters are just don't know better. That can only exist as long as people let it exist. I completely agree with that, because people, once they know better, they know better. All you have to do to make sure people know better is to talk to them, right? And then once you talk to them, they know better. And then the ball really is no longer in the court to say that they're just like uneducated on what's happening. I think where we part a little bit is and I don't know, this is something I'd be interested to see, and I've been saying this online, is I wish that and the state's not going to do this, but I wish they would investigate more about who all was there. Because what I see from people who were there, I mean, there's the son of a New York Supreme Court justice. Like I said, there's military, there's police, there's lawmakers. The lady who was killed was ex-military and was she was petite bourgeois. She owned a pool company. So what I've been seeing is a lot of petite bourgeois and arms of the state that were there. That isn't to say that that's everyone, but I would say at least the class character of what was happening and what the class character of that movement is certainly petite bourgeois. Though that doesn't mean everyone in it is petite bourgeois. That means that they could, as you said, being misguided. And the way that we respond to that, right, I think is important. And that is by talking to our neighbors and our family members if we know people like that, and just in general. Because even the run-of-the-mill, even a run-of-the-mill liberal who maybe doesn't support that, still can only be misguided as long as we let them be misguided, right? So I think that that's important. And like I said, I think the weird things that I think of about what happened with the I'm going to keep calling them militias just to simplify the discussion, is, well, first, the big weird thing is that the DOD wasn't called, and that the DOD was requested several times. And the reason they're giving that they didn't accept the call was because technically the National Guard in DC answers directly to the president. So the DC police answer to the Senate, and obviously they didn't answer to the Senate that day. And the DOD, as far as the National Guard is concerned, answers directly to the president. And the president said, don't go in. Now, the fact that what ended up happening is that they responded to the vice president is weird, like really weird, like legitimately bizarre. They shouldn't have. They should have said no. They should have not responded, but they did respond. And within an hour of, so Trump, this is like the events as I saw them, was they got in, they started ransacking the place and taking goofy selfies and all this weird shit. And then the DOD finally gets called by Pence. In the same hour, Trump gets banned from all social media. And all of a sudden, the Senate is back in session and they're kind of not even talking about what happened, which is fucking weird. Like, that's really weird. So there has to have been, the fact that the National Guard even listened to Pence means there had to have been a discussion at somewhere high in the bourgeois state to no longer listen to the president. Because if the president tells the DC National Guard don't go in, they're not supposed to go in. So the fact that they didn't listen to him is weird, like really weird, like unprecedented weird. So that's why it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if coup's the right word, and it definitely was clownish because their goals were like bizarre. What you're gonna burn the electoral college votes? Like, that's not something they could do again. They're not like destroying like handwritten ballots. They're destroying a bunch of elected people's ballots for their state. But it was definitely something bizarre that must have been discussed within government for it to go as far as it did. I guess that's what I take away from it.
I mean, like we're saying, like I was saying before, like obviously they were used, they were duped.
Yeah.
To use into possibly what it seems to like add up to is more crackdowns, more surveillance. They're getting people, to co-sign this for more expansion. This is how the whole like Patriot Act thing happen too. They want like a more extreme Patriot Act because the system here is in crisis. People don't have the resources to get through this crisis, so people are desperate. Look, I mean, like that should, what we saw at the Capitol, all the masses of people should really speak to how desperate people are. People are willing to lay their life on the line for a guy that did nothing for them, but like, said things that got them, that he said enough rhetoric to get them off the couch and actually go fight for him.
Yeah.
No,
I agree.
Yes. People are desperate. I mean, I don't think I don't think it's helpful for like, especially people on the left or parties to like, just label like everyone there as like a white nationalist, like, mob of people or like coup plotters, like that. People are desperate. People need that. They want the same material gains that people that we want. It's just they don't understand. Like, I mean, I think a lot of us come from backgrounds where we didn't have these ideas about Marxism. Like we had to be taught and like learn. And
Mhm.
so I think for us just to disregard them as like, oh, that they should know better, I don't think helps. I think, it's up to, actual Marxists and actual Marxist parties, to get out to the masses and teach them this, because that's our duty.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I
Utilize the
completely
masses.
agree.
I mean, but imagine if these
As
people,
far as talking to the people, yes.
yeah, I mean, like imagine if they actually had the leadership of a vanguard party
Mhm.
that
Yes.
had actual demands, material demands that actually benefited everyone.
Exactly. This is something that I was talking about as well, and this is why I see some of the confusion I think online. Is I feel like there's been this culture of, like I said, revolt is an abstract, and that's something that I myself, as someone who was largely radicalized online, didn't 100% fall into, but that I saw, especially when I was like a baby Marxist or a baby leftist, quote unquote, where I wasn't really a Marxist yet. Um, where it's like this idea of like just revolt, like that's what we want, is just to revolt. And I feel like that when that when the idea of revolt gets removed from the material realities of the working people, right? Because like socialists, we are for a socialist revolution, and we are against the bourgeois state. But that's why we struggle for things like, we struggle against imperialism, and we struggle for housing rights, and we struggle for national liberation, and these, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in those struggles, what we end up doing is we end up forming this mass line, kind of what you're talking about, where these people who are struggling with us might not be socialists, right? You go to an anti-imperialist protest, protesting against the war in Iraq or something, and the majority, or not the majority, but everyone there isn't a Marxist. A lot of those people are going to be liberals, they're going to be anarchists, they're going to be whatever else. But you become unified in your struggle for that one element against the bourgeois state. And as that becomes stronger, and as socialists become more and more prominent within those individual movements, the vanguard starts to be able to unify these movements. The problem with trying to do that with abstract ideas about revolution is then the discussion gets really tricky, because we are not the only group that is against the bourgeois state. I mean, looking at the more vocal people at that I don't know, at the thing that happened at the Capitol, whatever you want to call it, you have people straight up saying, we're fighting against the communist United States government. We are going to show the people of Venezuela how you take out a communist leader, and things like that. Like, we're anti-communists, but they believe that they're fighting the US government to fight communism,
But
which
you
is
know
so
what?
misguided. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what though? There's an entity walking around here called the synthetic left. And that's what gets promoted in mainstream outlets, is this idea of the left, and everyone who identifies as a socialist wants the destruction. They want poverty. They want degrowth. They want to take your house. They want to take your your shit. And
Mhm.
they want to go backwards, not forwards. They hate America, and they want to burn everything down. They don't want that. No one wants that. No one wants to hear that. And that's not correct. That's not what socialism is about. That's not what
Yeah.
revolutionary Marxism is about. It's
Yeah.
the
And it's not how you
opposite.
build it. It's not how you
Socialism,
build it either. Yeah.
people think that's what they think. They think socialism is about destruction and poverty, and that's not true.
Yeah.
It's and that's why we need to get to the masses to teach them what it's really about, which is about growth, prosperity, and abundance and construction. It's not what this synthetic left is. And I think once they understand that, then they will see that they have more in common with socialism. They have that's what they really are deep down, whether they know it or not.
Absolutely. No, yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I think this is really an largely online phenomenon that you're pointing out. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's born, like I said, it's born from this isolation from the working class, which is I think what you're talking about, and how socialists, as a result of multiple things, including state repression, became really isolated from the masses. And that's why it's important for us, as like you're saying, to talk to our neighbors and talk to our family members, and like I was saying, to get involved in these struggles, like the struggles that are going on in your community. And the more influential we become to the people, well, I guess we're already influential to the people around us, but the more influential we become to the people in these movements, and the more connected we become to those movements, that's the idea of the vanguard, is then we start to be able to link them. Then within the same party or within the same organization, we're like, okay, well, we have 6 people in the labor movement, we have 30 people in this, the anti-war movement, we have 40 people in high places in this other movement, and now we could all work in concert to ensure that these movements not only are struggling for their own individual aspects, but also that we're starting to link the rhetoric with the problem is the bourgeois state, the problem is imperialism, the problem is capitalism. And yeah, so yeah, I agree. You want to get my really hot take? I guess this isn't really, and it's funny because it's not really a hot take, but it's definitely a quotable. So if you read the law, and I'm not obviously like some Law and Order whatever,
Read the
but
law.
yeah, exactly. But if you read the law as it's written, and I guess it depends how they define it, but if you read the law how it's written, technically people who plan to undermine democracy in the United States by way of disregarding one section of the government in order to put another in power should be put to death. Not all of them, but the leaders. That's a part of it. It's literally written into the law. So now I feel like we're in this really interesting place where maybe it's legal to call for the president to not be alive anymore. I don't know. I'm afraid to say it, but that would be my quotable, where people could take that and be like, Tankie Talk said the president should be put to death under a sedition law. And I don't like the law. So, I mean, I don't like the law in general. So that's like its own separate discussion. But once I started thinking about that, it's a really interesting discussion about like the weakness of the law as it's written, because the bourgeois state acts with impunity. So then and even if you don't consider this a coup, just in general as a discussion, if the bourgeois state acts with impunity, and a coup by definition has to come within the bourgeois state, then does that make that law not does that make that law merely symbolic? What does that mean? And we have this weird example now where, depending on how you analyze it, you can look at it and say, when could this law be used? Like, what's the legalese behind sedition and how it works? And what happens if next time, right, if this 45% of the country, and hopefully that 45% comes fucking down, I'm sure it will, that supports even what some people are calling a coup? What if there's a more serious attempt at doing something like that, and it's by the head of the executive branch, or shit, the head of any one of the branches? What does that mean? Like, are they going to put them to death? I don't think that's ever going to happen. So then the law becomes meaningless, and it becomes just like most of the bourgeois state. It becomes just a law that is imposed upon the working class. And so talk about a gaping hole in the middle of what a lot of right-wingers would say is like this divine document called the Constitution. There's this gigantic gaping hole that literally does not have a serious way to deal with sedition that comes within the government.
Yeah,
I don't know.
mean,
I was thinking about it
don't
earlier.
know. That's something I need to understand. That I'm not familiar with that. I need to understand the context and really look into that to really speak to that. But I don't, that whole thing. I just think what we should be focusing on is getting to them, because right now their leader that they love so much, who did nothing for them, just used them as pawns, as his own entertainment. They need leadership. They're abandoned, and it's up to us to get to them, because if we don't, a fascist will. A
No, I agree.
real fascist will get to them, and we shouldn't be discarding them. That's my whole point, is like, we shouldn't be just discarding them and like pointing to, oh well, this or that person with this sort of like job was that. I mean, we don't really go peel through like people who attend Black Lives Matter protests and see what their job status is, or what where they work or do for a living. none of that really matters. I think us getting to them and informing them about what real socialism is and what that would look like in America matters.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I agree. Like I said, I agree with talking. You should talk to your neighbors. You should talk to your family. You should talk to anybody who will listen to you about socialism. And you should define that word, because I feel like that becomes a problem. And this doesn't work for everybody, but that should be your goal. Is people are afraid of the word socialism and the word Marxism, and it becomes less scary if you begin to define it as an individual, as like a person who knows someone, as a relationship, as opposed to scary propaganda defining it. When it becomes like Fred Hampton said, if you're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself, because socialism is the people. And so when you start to define it like that, people will become naturally less afraid of it. That isn't universal, but that's, I think, a good idea. But I mean, this is why I think this being a part of the different struggles are so important, because it's about those material gains for the working class. Like, socialism doesn't mean anything if it's not about material gains for the working class. And that's where the word gets I don't know, the word becomes an abstract. It becomes a liberalized, where it's like, we want socialism, but like, what socialism is helping the working class, and the country serving the working class and being controlled by the working class. And so in order to get there and to build that, that's why those individual struggles are so important. And so, I mean, yeah, and I wouldn't even know. And like you said, we don't ask, there's no gate person at, like, if you go to a struggle against police brutality, there's no one standing there who makes you show like your political alignment as you come in. Because, and the reason why that's like that is because those struggles are progressive, and they're working class in nature. The struggle against police brutality is a working class struggle. It's a struggle for our class. The same thing with like housing rights, and the same thing with, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Anti-imperialism. These are the class nature of these struggles, are working class struggles. So that's why you can build that kind of united front, because these people are struggling for something that is a part of building socialism. The problem with what happened with the Capitol, and this is why you get some people who are like, well, the left should do this. Like, why don't the left do this? And one of those problems is like what you said, they didn't have any clear demands, but it seemed like their intention pretty expressly was to ensure Trump ended up president again. And that isn't a working class struggle. You know what I mean? Like, that struggle is not for the working class. And then on top of that, of course, the reason why the left can't do that, which was the first, like, as it was happening, I saw this confusion a lot online, when it's like, why don't we do this? Why haven't we do this? They're showing us how it's done, or something like that. I read a quote like that. And it's like, well, yeah, when the police let you in, that makes it a pretty fucking a much simpler task to do things, when the police who are guarding the building literally move aside and go right this way. I mean,
obviously, if it was like a Black Lives Matter, protest, like it would have been, that wouldn't have happened. Obviously, we know that. But what we do know is that people did get killed, people did get hurt. But obviously, that shows you what we saw there. There was some coordination going on behind the scenes that we don't really know yet. And I think, I think what we're seeing right now is some proof of that with the crackdown on what's going on in social media, like suspending Trump's Twitter, and Biden now is passing a bill that's gonna crack down on domestic terrorists.
Yeah. No, I agree.
This is all played into that. What we saw now, what we saw a few days ago, helped build this up. What we're seeing.
Yeah.
So I think that we really need to be mindful of the the tactics that the ruling class are using, and I think we need to be mindful that of the actual divisions within the ruling class, because obviously Silicon Valley is not a fan of Trump, and
no, I agree.
So we have to be really careful who's like what parties are backed by what factions of the ruling class, and we need to use those different divisions to our advantage. And I think that's really important to like get to. That's why we need to get to people and teach them and let them know about like how this all works.
Absolutely. And I think, and right now with COVID, I feel like a lot of people have never, and this is why and I guess there's a subsect of people who don't believe in COVID, and that this discussion is different with them, I guess. But the people who see what's going on with COVID and understand even a little bit what's going on with COVID, then from what I've noticed talking to liberals who for a long time blew me off when I tried to talk to them about politics at all, it is becoming very real to them in that the government is literally, like the US state is literally abandoned the working class during COVID.
Just yesterday was the most amount of deaths people from COVID.
Yeah, we're like almost, I'd be shocked if we don't, because on 9/11 it was high 2000s. Now we're already over 4,000. So we're going to be doubling 9/11s every day here shortly. And people are so like, this is what I say to people who tell me, like, because China has all but eradicated COVID. And exactly. I'll tell people that
extreme poverty,
yeah, and extreme poverty, yes. And but yeah, I'll talk to people about China, like,
and that's what we need to tell people. This is what socialism does. This is
exactly
what socialism does.
Yes, and then so people will say to me, like, well, they did these things that we wouldn't be okay with, and I have to tell them, and just not even on a political thing, just on like a logic thing, like COVID spreads through proximity. It is like, if you understand that, it becomes really easy. Like, that's all China did, was like kept people away from other people for long enough to test everybody. And then once people tested positive, then they knew, okay, you're going to have to be isolated a little bit longer and treated. And the people who don't have it just don't go around the people that do have it, and then it dies. Like, that's how it dies. And now in China, the issues that they're seeing are it coming from overseas because they've opened up but in the US, it's shocking. It's shocking to me. And it's shocking how misinformed the media and the state have kept people on this, because it's such a basic discussion of like, how do you deal with a virus that only spreads if you're fucking within a certain distance of someone who has it? It's like, just don't go around that person. It's literally that easy. And the fact that the state can't figure it out, it just goes to show the priorities of the state. What class's interest is the state serving?
Exactly. And look what they're doing now. They're trying to do this impeachment bullshit. And he has 10 days left or something. Why not fight for healthcare? Why not actually start fighting for money to give to people, like those $2,000 checks we're supposed to have? They're not doing that. This is all symbolism. They all care about symbolic shit that doesn't benefit anybody materially at all.
I completely agree. Even in dealing with what happened, it's all symbols. I think it's funny because, like I said, technically, according to the law, according to the rhetoric that the Democrats are using, and this is technically, the punishment should be fucking death. And they're literally talking about, oh, the head of the DC police resigned. And it's like, what? Talk about a symbolic fucking win. You people are yelling at the top of your lungs that it was a coup attempt. And at the same time, you're like, don't worry, guys, we got him. The head of the police stepped down. Like, what the fuck? Talk about something symbolic. And no, I completely agree. It's the Democrats, for better or worse, now have control of the House, the Senate, and the fucking executive branch. They're back to where they were when Obama first got it. And I was naive enough back then to say, because I had friends who were like, Obama said he was gonna do all this stuff and he's not doing it. And I was naive enough at the time as a liberal to be like, it takes time to do things. If Trump has proven anything, it is that belief is fucking wrong. Trump did a lot his first 100 days just through executive action, and they were not good things. So this becomes this discussion with people is, there only becomes certain options. Either the Democrats don't want to do it, or the state is unable to do certain things. And so either way, the material reality is the same. And I feel like that's a discussion that is important to have, because people keep trying to push down. People keep trying to firstly accept symbolic victories, and then secondly, they keep trying to kind of push the buck, where they're like, no, we could do these good things, but when we have a majority in the Senate, oh, we have a majority in the Senate. Oh, but when we, I don't know, have a bigger majority, or when we have a different president, and it becomes this big thing like, okay, so either the Democrats won't do it or the Democrats can't do it. And either way, it's acting contrary to our interests. Even if people don't understand class, just as individuals, it's contrary to our interests to continue to play that game. Like, it's because that's a game at that point. So that's been a big part of the discussions I've been having with liberals specifically is when I talk to them and they say like, well, these people are doing this. And I'm like, look, I don't care if you like AOC. I don't care as an individual. If you have a fucking squad poster up, good, keep it. I don't want to take your squad poster. All I'm saying is that what they said they're going to do, they're either not doing or they can't do it. And
no,
so
they're not doing. They're serving different class interests. That's who they serve. The bourgeois. That's who they serve. Whatever faction it is. They don't serve our interests. That's why we need to, get people to realize that you need to get out of these parties and organize and formulate a working class revolutionary socialist party that actually can challenge these the two-party war machine, because that's the only way that we can actually mobilize a political transformation.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's a good place to plug. Everybody should go to frso.org/join if you're in the United States, and you should join FRSO. But yeah, and I feel like socialist parties, at least what I see from FRSO, to be clear, as I hope everyone knows, I'm here as an individual, so I don't want to pretend like I'm speaking for the party. But I like the United Front. I think that that's a smart way to approach what we're talking about, how to engage people who don't necessarily understand socialism, and honestly, who, as far as the abstract word goes, don't really care. They're invested in an idea about socialism while they're struggling for things that are a part of the struggle to build socialism. So, and I feel like that's a good way to do that, is getting involved in those individual struggles and then building up a united front that way. Because when people see like, oh, that's Billy, who I see at the anti-war protests all the time. I know he's a good guy. He's a part of a socialist party. The socialist party is probably good.
Yeah, but what we should also, not just like individually, but like as a group, like as as comrades, as a part of an organization, should be going to the masses, and also not, we should also be building, do what the Black Panthers did.
Yeah.
Help build organizations within these communities that show that actually help their conditions, that like a food program, like what the Black Panthers did. There's so many other examples. So I think that's what we really need to be working on in order to really
especially right now. And I feel like the struggle of the immediate future has to have something to do with housing, because there are so many people who are on the verge of being kicked out of their house, and the bourgeois state has been literally kicking this can down the road. They have not addressed it, and I think at this point it's too big for them to address without making huge structural changes within the state. Right. There's going to be this massive uptick.
We should have people that within our organizations know about housing laws, and how they can fight eviction, and people who are medically trained, people that can't afford to go to the doctor, can come to one of our locations, or we can go to them and treat them. That's what the Black Panthers did too.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's how you really start to get people to realize what socialism can offer and what it's about. It's about class solidarity. It's about forming a government of action that works for working families, that's built to rebuild this country, not destroy it, not burn it all down. It's to rebuild and make everyone live a prosperous life, because socialism is about increasing productive forces, not decreasing. That's how China was able to alleviate extreme poverty. They didn't do it by degrowth. They did it by growth, by pro-growth.
Yeah.
And that's what people need to understand.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think, socialism has to be rooted in, like I said, the interests of the working class, and because that's literally what socialism is. Now, I mean, a part of it also is going to be national liberation, and I think this is another thing that I would highly endorse FRSO on. I think FRSO's line on national liberation is bar none the best that I've seen.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Like we obviously, with a socialism with American characteristics, we have we have our own unique history, and we obviously would center, like in any other socialist, movement, would be people most impacted. Um, you know, obviously, people that uh, strive for self-determination, and obviously would play a big role in that. Like if they like once we actually have a system set up, and if they want to like have their own, they want to succeed and have their own, like, black belt or
Yeah,
whatever, then that's up to them. It's not up to us. That's up to them to decide. And I think
exactly,
that's really
exactly right.
important.
And I
That's
feel like
really
that's
important. And a lot of people here, like a lot of socialists here, like to like study Mao and Stalin and Lenin, and that's great. I think that's important. But we have our own socialists here. We have William C. Foster. We have Gus Hall. We have Eugene Debs. I think
yeah, the Black Panther Party. That's
Black
why I think
Panther
it's
Party,
interesting.
exactly. Yes,
Um,
Huey Newton. We should be studying them too, because this is what they advocate, and that's what socialism with American characteristics would include. We would include the all these revolutionary struggles that happened here. I
yeah,
think
no,
a lot of leftists here don't really like to, for some reason, they don't study their own history here. We have it. We have our own like socialist movements here
yeah.
and
I
leaders.
think it's interesting when like I forget who it was. Somebody was talking. I think it was something about the IRA, about how people in the U.S. like to have opinions on the IRA, and I don't not to tell people not to and have an interest in the IRA specifically, but I agree. The first place that I really got brought me into interest in socialism was, well, firstly, I was brought in by being anti-imperialist. And then after I started really being interested in socialism, I studied the Black Panther Party. And I feel like that's a really important aspect to study. And the Black Panthers, I mean, they're all about, it was about serving the people, like building alternatives. What it was explained to me when I was a newer Marxist was you build alternatives to the state, which shows the working class that the state isn't taking, it gives something to contrast the state with. You have a school lunch program and you go, whoa, the state doesn't offer this, the Black Panthers offer this. And you have a free clinic program, you're like, whoa, the Black
Mhm.
Panthers offer this, the state doesn't do this. And it kind of shows people like, okay, we can take care of ourselves. And once that's a big part of understanding, if you're talking about what things that need to happen to build socialism and to build revolutionary fervor within the working class communities, is this the working class needs to start to firstly prove that it can take care of itself, because we can, and we have to. Literally, we have to. During COVID, it has been shown that we have to. If we don't, we all die. So not only do we have to prove that we can do that and start building the structures to do that, but then in building those structures and proving it, people start to see like, oh, okay, so the state is just here to exploit us. They're not serving our interests. Our interests are served by the working class itself. We don't need the bourgeois state. We don't need the bourgeoisie. We don't, and that's a part of, I think, the using material changes as opposed to debate. I feel like that's an important aspect of building socialism. Obviously, as I said a couple times, always talk to everyone, talk to anyone who will listen to you. And once um, once people prove that they don't, once people know, then it's up to them to prove that they're no longer reactionary or whatever, whatever, whatever. But if you don't talk to people, then you can't ever change that. It becomes a big circle of like, the right talks to people and the left doesn't talk to people, and we become isolated from the working class. And that's our community. It is
Right.
not the right wing's community. It is our community. We are as Marxists, we are the working class. And if we don't talk to each other, then we're never going to be able to move forward, because people are just going to be like, oh yeah, you're right. Billy Bob and Joe and Tom or whatever, a bunch of names, they just don't know better. And it's like, so go fucking talk to Joe and Bob and Bill and Tim. Go explain
Exactly.
to them. Once you
Exactly.
tell them, they know better.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, expect blueprints, like detailed plans, and that's just not possible. And I think it's just important to kind of like let people know, and educate them, and let them know that we do have this revolutionary history here. We did have these, parties like the Black Panther Party. We did have these, the Communist Party here, and we had these figures like William Z. Foster, Huey Newton, Gus Hall, and really
Harry
study
Haywood. I didn't say Harry Haywood. Harry Haywood. I recommend
Harry
everybody read
Haywood.
Harry
Yeah,
Haywood.
yeah. I mean, Eugene Debs. Like the
Yeah.
list can go on. I'm sure that there's so many that we're not listing here, but I think once people know that, it was possible, it's possible here. We do have revolutionary potential. And to go around and saying otherwise is just very defeatist, and that's rooted in like the synthetic left. That's very it's very defeatist,
Yeah.
and that doesn't help anyone here. No one wants to hear that it's not possible that we can actually make a change that can benefit everybody. Um, People need optimism right now,
I,
and
I
we
agree.
gotta
And
give
this
it
is
to them.
this is something I was talking about the other day too, is when I talk to liberals who know me, like have had political discussions with me, a lot of the times they'll say something bad's going on and they have a knee-jerk reaction where they want to say like first world problems. Like
Yeah,
I'm sure you've
fuck
heard
with
that.
that shit.
And I always tell them, don't do that. Like, stop doing that. It's okay to be mad about things. Because I mean,
Yeah,
there is a difference, right? There's first world problems are like, oh my gosh, I don't know. So something that like a bourgeois problem would be like, oh my maid took the day off and now I need something. But people are coming to me and they're like, I'm really worried about being evicted right now because I haven't been able to work and my rent went up. And they're like, first world. I'm like, not a fucking first world problem. You're going to be homeless. Worry about that.
that's a
Really be
working
mad.
class problem.
Yeah, exactly. They're working class problems. And this, I feel like it's something that in the United States that was done, and it's kind of like subconsciously almost like a we don't have a right to be unhappy thing. And it's like, no, we do have a right to be unhappy. It's okay to be mad about things. You
Yeah,
should be madder. That's what I tell you. Be
exactly.
more angry.
Exactly. I mean, like what the imperialists have done, like the imperialist nations have done to the third world, they're doing here. We're in the stage of accumulation through destruction.
Yeah.
So that's what
Yeah, yeah.
that's why we have that's why we have the prison industrial complex. That's why we have ICE. That's why we have the pharmaceutical industrial complex. That's why we have all these destructive complexes, because that's how they're making profits. And they're trying to deindustrialize the first world. So I mean that's what we're dealing with now, is we're in that stage of imperialism.
Yeah. But I
And
think that, and I think that's interesting. Another way of like engaging with your neighbors and stuff. Not only It's not only important to let people know about socialism and about national liberation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to make people know about it. But the other thing is a part of like educate, right? That's kind of educate. That's kind of that point is educating people. But the other one is agitate. It's good to agitate, to point out like this is a problem you should be angry about, especially right now with COVID. I get such funny looks. In China, there was just three politicians who are getting in trouble, like pretty severely in trouble, because in China it's a law that local officials have to serve the well-being of the community, and if they prove they don't, specifically with COVID, China's punishing them. And so there was a little mini outbreak. I think there was like 100 new cases,
mhm.
and so those politicians are being blamed. In Illinois, there is 100 new cases every 20 minutes, and that's been
Yeah,
going on for fucking months.
I
And
know.
I get funny looks from liberals when I'm like, our politicians should be punished for what they're doing, and people look at me like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And it's like, no, they're not serving our interests even a
Right.
little bit. Like a
I know.
100 new cases every fucking 20 minutes. In California, they have like 100 new cases like every fucking like 5 minutes or something absurd. They had 75,000 cases the other day. 75,000 new cases in a single day. I don't
Unbelievable.
It is. It's shocking. It's
That's the
absurdly
difference,
shocking.
and that's what we should show. We should show a country which has the dictatorship of the proletariat versus the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and this is what you get. And I think,
Exactly. And that's manifest in the state. It's manifest in the laws, the way that the laws are carried out and what laws exist. It's the same thing with theft. Talk about the monetarily, the largest money that's stolen, most monetary money that's stolen in the United States is wage theft.
yeah,
Like
wage
that's
theft.
and no one gets punished for it ever. I did a bunch of research on this trying to figure it out. I think one person got like censured but didn't get any jail time in like the whole history of the fucking country. And
I know.
every year, the majority of the people in prison are there for nonviolent burglary.
Yep.
Like it's fucking absurd. Talk about like a class's interest being reflected through the laws and how they're enforced. the cops don't even go. You call 911 and say, my boss didn't pay me. They tell you to go fuck yourself. You got to call a whole different department. It's, I don't know, shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking as far as the state not reflecting the majority of people's interests, because the majority of people obviously are working class.
Yeah. But I think that's a good note to end on. So again, before we wrap up, why don't you let people know where they can find your work?
Oh, absolutely. So like I said, search Tankie Talk in that search bar right now if you're watching on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter as at Talk Tankie, because for some reason they flipped my name when I put it in as Tankie Talk. And ultimately, the big thing I want to plug is everybody out there who is interested in getting in the struggle, which everyone needs to do. That's the most important thing. Every single person you look up to, whether you're a socialist, anarchist, anything else, any person you look up to politically was a part of an organization. Join some organization. If you're a Marxist, I recommend joining FRSO. Look into FRSO, FRSO.org/join. And when I reached out to FRSO, I said exactly this. I said, I work full time and my job takes up the majority of my time. I have a child and I'm married and I have lots of family responsibilities. I don't know how I can help, but I really want to help. And they got in touch with me within a couple of weeks and said, here are some possible ways for you to help. We're going to put you in touch with local comrades. That's literally as simple as it can be. Just put in there your availability. If you don't think you're available or you have physical limitations or time constraints, explain that. FRSO wants you to help if you want to help. So do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. They were really responsive to me too, and people should go check it out for sure. What projects they're working on now?
I know that people so through the Chicago Alliance, because the FRSO also works with the Chicago Alliance, there's some things to release prisoners, to release wrongfully convicted and prisoners of police torture. And then there's the struggle for CPAC, which is ongoing in the city of Chicago. And I know FRSO, there's, I don't know, I don't want to give anything specific because I'm not positive, but I know that there's discussions, kind of what we were just having about what happened the other day at the Capitol building. So I'm interested to see where that goes as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Carmad. We'll catch up again soon.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.